Alright, what's going on everyone? I'm Zero and welcome back to Zero 2, where today I've got a hand trap tier list for you. With YCS Birmingham just wrapping up and the new Blue Eyes structure deck right around the corner, I figure out now is a great time to go over what hand traps you should be playing and what different spots in the current format. There's a lot of different decks going around with Ryzeal, Malice. We just saw Fire King win the YCS. There's Crystron, Mermail, a whole host of brand new decks and strategies that are all viable. So I'm going to go through all of the hand traps that I think are worth talking about, go over their viability in the current format, and we'll go over how they perform against each deck. Starting off, we have arguably the best hand trap of the format at the moment, Mulcharmy Fuelos. This is a definite main deck. Only reason you wouldn't be main decking it is for the price point. Obviously, Fuelos is a relatively expensive card. Notably, it's going to be seeing a reprint in about a couple months, so you won't have to wait too long for it to hopefully drop down to a reasonable price point. But for now, if you're priced out of it, I totally understand. If not, you should definitely be playing it. Getting a draw every time your opponent special summons from the deck or extra deck can be absolutely lethal against a lot of the top decks. Ryzeal special summons a ton of times from the extra deck. Malice special summons a ton of times from the extra deck. You can basically just shut down their turn unless they want to give you 4 or 5 draws. We saw that the reason Fire King did so well in this recent event was, one, mostly due to Dinkabui's incredible play, shoutouts to him, but second, because it really didn't have many opportunities to be Fool Lost, but even against that deck, it can still be an Upstart Goblin, so not dead at all. Definitely throw it in the main deck if you have it. Super strong card. And sure, it's dead going first, but I think the value you get out of it going second is definitely worth the downside of drawing it going first. Moving on, we have Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. I'm going to go ahead and throw this into Situational. It's a card that isn't seeing the most play right now, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill does hit a lot of cards right now at the moment. It can hit the Ryzeal Duo Drive to negate it and stop them from searching preemptively because they won't even get the chance to activate it. That being said, it doesn't get to chain to the Duo Drive, so they can go ahead and make another one and redo it because you'll have to do it on summon in response to its attach back on summon effect. And so you won't get the opportunity to negate the search, which isn't that great, which is why I'm definitely not throwing it in like a side or main deck slot. It's not that great. You'd much rather have a Veiler or an Imperm, but we'll get to that. And then it can also hit some of the Malice monsters when they get summoned back from the Banished Zone. So definitely not a dead hand trap, but it's probably like 6 or 7 down my list of viable hand traps at the moment. So if you have the main deck space and you're really struggling to find an extra hand trap, you might want to put this one in, but I'd recommend you wait until we fill out the rest of this list before jumping to any of those conclusions. Alrighty, next on our list we've got Ghost Ogre. This, I would say, is also probably pretty situational, arguably even not worth it at the moment. In fact, I'm going to go ahead and put it at not worth it. There just aren't many decks that play around into Ghost Ogre in any full capacity. There are very few monsters on the field that get hit super hard by Ghost Ogre. It can interrupt some plays, but a lot of times people just have ways to extend through it. I suppose it prevents the Duo Drive from... Actually, let me go confirm that real quick. Yeah, so I just confirmed it. It will stop Duo Drive if it's the only monster on their field that has Xyz material. If you chain to the Duo Drive detaches for effect. So I suppose Ogre would stop Duo Drive, so maybe I'll put it back into Situational. I think that's an argument for why you might want to consider playing it in an extra slot, but against Malice, it does very little. They're already so good at getting so many bodies onto the board. That one Ogre on any of their individual pieces isn't that great, especially when they have GWC to just bring it right back from the graveyard as an extender anyways that they can search through their main combos. Against Fire King, it pops their stuff, which will probably just give them a plus down the line. definitely not something you're super interested in. Same thing with Cristrons. A lot of the Cristrons trigger when they're destroyed, and benefit from being destroyed. So it's not even good to like Crystron or any of the rogue strategies at the moment. So I'd say all in all, it's situational, close to not worth it. But I'd say the application against Duo Drive at least maybe lets you consider using it. At the same time, if they've already established cross or if they have a detonator who can protect their stuff, Ghost Ogre just feels extremely useless. So I would put it in at very last resort. It's definitely worse than Ghost Mourner. Spooky Dogwood. I would say this is probably the peak of situational. Spooky Dogwood has in the past seen a lot of success in tournaments setting specifically. I would say at like your local or even probably the regional level, Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood's usage probably falls off quite a bit. But if you're at a long, high level tournament where games might be expected to take a while and you're playing a deck that can grind and really go back and forth with your opponent, something like maybe like a Fiendsmith or like a Ryziel, where they have a lot of resources, can play multiple turns, reset up their board, are trying to establish a control back and forth resource game. This card can be good, especially against like Ryziel, who kind of can struggle to put a lot of damage on board. Ghost Sister can make sure that you live and probably even win the game, given how many times they special summon over the course of their turn. Same thing against Malice. Malice special summons a ton of times in the turn, which would give you a ton of life points. So as a side deck card, game 3, I could easily see this seeing some play. But at the same time, the top decks do feel beatable at the moment. They don't feel as broken as some of the previous top decks used to be, where Ghost Sister and Spooky Dogwood was in there as like a, well, if you're going to do something broken, I'm just going to win because you summoned so many times and gave me so many life points that you actually just can't kill me. And it was a lot better. It was almost at one point a definite side deck card, in my opinion, a couple of formats ago. Now I would say situational, but by no terms bad. Chaos Hunter. I think I'm going to talk about both Chaos Hunter and Artifact Lancia in the same breath and at the same time, because they are essentially doing the same thing. Artifact Lancia, you can discard it from your hand. Your opponent cannot banish monsters for the rest of this turn. Actually, both players can't banish monsters for the rest of this turn. That is very important because if you have your own Bystials in hand, it turns them off. Similarly, Chaos Hunter is a monster that says when your opponent special summons a monster, you can discard a card and special summon the Chaos Hunter. This prevents your opponent from banishing cards, period. So both of these stop banishing, and both of these are extremely strong into the Malice matchup. I believe the statistic that I heard at YCS Birmingham was 94% of side decks at YCS Birmingham included Artifact Lancia. And I know that Dinkabui's topping list contained Chaos Hunter instead. His rationale, I believe, was that it has about the same number of outs as Lancia does in terms of what your Malice opponent could have drawn in order to beat it. So these two cards, at least one of them is an auto include in your side deck. I would likely say that if you had to pick between the two, Lancia is the top dog. It's the prevailing opinion at the moment is to be playing Lancia. But you do get a pretty solid body off Chaos Hunter, and it is permanent, unlike Lancia, who only lasts the turn. As long as you can keep that Chaos Hunter on the field, it's going to continuously stop your opponent from banishing your stuff. That can even be great if you're also on the Fiendsmith stuff, and you want to make sure that your opponent isn't able to Bystial and stop your plays. Chaos Hunter can protect you there as well. So there's certainly arguments to Chaos Hunter. It's why I'm not going to bump it down to situational, because I do see the merits in both. I think that's going to be something that warrants your own testing. I haven't come to a definitive conclusion. I will say that I personally have mostly been playing Lancia, and it feels great. But again, do your own testing, do your own research. Whatever feels best for you, I would stick to. Gamma, not worth it. Gamma hasn't been worth it for a long time, ever since it got limited. The one Handtrap, one brick ratio is just not going to cut it. If we ever get Gamma back to more than one copy, I think we can certainly talk about playing it again. It was very good when it was at 3, and I think that it has a very good matchup into a lot of other hand traps of the format, but it's just not simply worth being played when you don't have many copies of it available to you. Okay, so next on our list we have Contact C. This is a hand trap that when your opponent normal or special summons a monster, You get to special summon this card to their field as a level 6 insect, earth insect. And then your opponent cannot Xyz, Link, Fusion, Synchro, unless they use this as material. I'm going to go ahead and say that this is particularly not worth it. With all the Fiendsmith running around, it doesn't seem like a good idea to give your opponent an extra body on board that they can just link off into Moon of the Closed Heaven and continue their link combos. I could actually see it seeing some niche use into the Ryziel Pure deck, because the Ryziel Pure deck would have a really hard time outing this, although they presumably at least play something like SP Little Knight in their extra deck, which can get rid of this essentially for free. Against Blue Eyes, the new Blue Eyes structure deck coming out, this could be interesting as well, because they rely so heavily on their Synchro Summons, and level 6 would be an awkward level for them to work with as a non-tuner. But I believe they still even play some generic link tools as well, so it's not even like a guarantee against them this will do anything. And again, I think just giving your opponent free link material is pretty bad in a format where there are a solid number of generic link monsters just floating out there. So I'm going to still say it's not worth it, even though it could have some potential niche applications. I suppose it's more worth it than Gamma. So we'll put it above Gamma. It's at the top of not worth it, borderline situation. Shifter, interestingly enough, I'm going to put this in the situational tier. I think that Dimension Shifter is decent. It might even be above these two in terms of its applicability, because Fiendsmith is still running around, and Fiendsmith is effective at putting cards in the graveyard. It needs cards to hit the graveyard so it can shuffle them back, recycle them, get all the maximum value out of them. So turning off the graveyard is still very strong against that. But against something like Ryziel, they don't really care about the graveyard all that much. I guess it turns off their cross draw one, but at the same time, they still get to set up their detonator. They still get to search with their duo drive. They don't really have too much that interacts with the graveyard outside of Node, and they don't really need Node to do most of their main combos. Against Malice, you'd be giving them a benefit. Malice would be the only deck where I could see you still playing Shifter, because you want your monsters banished, and even though it would turn off some of their Bystials, you're already getting the perks of having them banished anyways, so it's mitigated regardless. I would say, yeah, Shifter is probably in its worst spot as of recent memory. It might be pretty good into Blue Eyes once Blue Eyes comes out, because it has a solid amount of interactions with the graveyard. And Blue Eyes needs a lot of its stuff to be in the graveyard to accrue all that advantage. Stuff like the Primites, stuff like the not the Sage, the other level 1 tuner that they have, the new Maiden. I think that those will do well, or not do well in Shifter. Those will get completely bodied by Shifter. So Shifter could see some more play once the Blue Eye strategy comes into its own, but for the time being, it doesn't feel that great. Droll and Lockbird feels really, really good right now. Ryziel, all of their monsters feel like they search. The Duo Drive searches, the X searches, the Sword searches, and so cutting them off from that alongside the cross draw can completely shut down a lot of their plays. Droll was extremely popular in the side this format, and I think that it's going to stay true because Blue Eyes searches a ton. It can get completely shut out by Droll. The Malice strategy doesn't search traditionally as often as you might like. It does a lot of setting and banishing from deck to kind of circumvent Droll. So Droll's not great into Malice, but I do still think that against Ryziel, against Blue Eyes, and against a lot of the rogue decks like Crystron and Fire King, Droll can shut down a lot of their main lines. And so keeping it in your side deck feels like almost a must in this format. Really, also, in my opinion, a definite side deck card for this format. The top decks are summoning a number of times from hand. Ryziel is summoning 3, 4, 5 times from hand with all of their level 4s that extend from the hand. So you'll get multiple draws if you Purleo your opponent. Against Malice, they're summoning probably a normal summon. They're summoning multiple Bystials in a turn, so you're getting 2, 3 draws off of them. Against rogue decks, Perulia can give you even more draws against stuff like Fire King, against stuff like Crystron and whatnot. I think that it can do very well. And then into Blue Eyes, the Blue Eyes deck normal summons twice for its mainline combo, meaning you at least get true draws off the Perulia, and that's assuming they don't have any other extension from hand, like the Blue Eyes Jet Dragon or whatnot. So I think that Perulia is extremely strong this format. It's going to get a lot better when Blue Eyes comes out, and is another definite inclusion in the side deck. Bystials are in an awkward spot, in my opinion. I want to put them in situational. A couple of weeks, or like a month, even a couple of weeks back, I would have said Bystials probably were in the definite main deck territory. But I think the biggest thing that YCS Birmingham taught us all was that the decks that are going to be performing well at high level tournaments are going to be the ones that can play around or don't care about getting Bystialed. We saw Malice doing extremely well because it doesn't play a lot of monsters that interact with the Bystials, and if it in a positive way for your opponent, like if you Bystial a Malice monster, they're just going to get an insane number of pluses off of that. They even frequently Bystial their own monsters in order to gain value off that, so you definitely don't want to play it into Malice. Against Ryzeal, just pure Ryzeal, which saw a lot of play at YCS Birmingham, you also wouldn't want to play it because there aren't many great light targets that they have in rotation that actually impact them. Sure, they do play a number of level 4 lights in the main deck, but at the same time, they aren't super impactful when they hit the graveyard. Like I mentioned with Shifter, they don't really interact with the graveyard all that much. And so the Bystials just aren't going to do much. It does do a solid amount into the Fiendsmith stuff, but the Fiendsmith stuff had a relatively low performance rate at Birmingham. Now, where this changes is once the Blue Eyes stuff comes out. I think once the Blue Eyes stuff comes out, Bystials become better again. So I think that they probably go at the top of situational now that I'm thinking about it a bit further. They could, even depending on how prevalent Blue Eyes is at your locals or at top events, we'll have to see. This could jump all the way back up to a definite main deck because hitting the Maiden out of the graveyard, hitting the Blue Eyes out of the graveyard can absolutely cripple a lot of Blue Eyes combos that they're trying to do. Now, that being said, they can still combo through a Bystial. It's not necessarily a turn ender against them, which is why I'm not going to be convinced to jump it up to definite main or even definite side deck. But I still think that the Bystials will be okay, just a lot weaker than they have been in previous formats. Okay, next card on our list, Molcharmy Meows. This is an interesting one. This was, I think, a breakout of recent YCSs, mainly because it was just released, so people haven't had too much time with the card. But I actually think the format is postured extremely well for Meows. The Fiendsmith stuff all summons itself back from the graveyard, or at least Engraver does, so that's a draw for Meows. The Malice stuff summons a bunch of times from Banishment, so you'll get a ton of draws off Meows against Malice. It's another anti-Malice card, in my opinion. Meows is also a card that does really well into a deck like Fire King, or a deck like Crystron, who's summoning a lot of times from the graveyard. And so Meows can absolutely shut that down. Additionally, Blue Eyes revives a number of times from the graveyard. And so it will be good into them as well. I think this is a definite inclusion as well. Now, as to whether you should play all 9 Molcharmies, I think that might be a bit much. So understanding that, I think that while I have both of these as definite side decks, you might want to pick one or the other. I think it really depends down to what your local format consists of, and whether or not you feel comfortable more so with the anti-Malice stuff or anti-Rogue Ryzeal is what I would say Perulia does. So think that through, make your own decisions, but I think both of these are extremely strong, and you can't go wrong with either one you picked. All right, so next is going to be one of our more controversial opinions, and that's going to be on Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries. I actually think this is a decent card, this format. I'm going to put it at very high situational. Most certainly not a definite side deck inclusion, but I think it warrants a solid consideration for the side deck, if you're especially scared of the Ryzeal matchup. I think that Ryzeal Detonator is such a powerhouse and such a pivotal portion of the Ryzeal end board and strategy, that so much so that a lot of people are main decking Metal Tronus, which again we're not talking here because it's not a hand trap, but as an alt detonator, they're also playing their own detonator in the extra deck so that they can banish it. And while I'd probably argue that Metal Tronus is a better card in general, and you can certainly play it, I think that Metal Tronus's usage can justify Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries seeing some play against the Ryzeal strategy. I think that playing your own detonator and then when they try and combo off, cutting them off from the detonator can feel pretty good. And so certainly if you're playing Ryzeal, but also if you are just worried a lot about Ryzeal, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries is probably in its best position I've seen it in years, and is worth considering overall. Okie dokie. So next on the list we have Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. I think that this card is going to be very good this upcoming format. I'm close to putting it in definite main deck. I think I'm going to put it in the definite side deck area. I think at the very least you should probably be side decking Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion. I think that Ghost Bell matches up extremely well into the Feedsmith cards. I think it matches up extremely well into the Blue Eyes cards, being able to cut them off of some pivotal revives in the graveyard. And just all in all, can also stop stuff like the Bestials and Call by the Grave on your own Handtraps and Mulch Armies. It just feels really good at the moment. It's a card that is seeing a solid amount of play at the moment, but less so than I would have expected, given how good it's going to be. But I think once Blue Eyes releases and there's a lot more graveyard interactions going on, Ghost Bell just becomes way better, and we'll get the chance to see it shine, I think. So for this upcoming format, I think Ghost Bell is definitely a big sleeper. At least side deck it, probably consider it as a main deck slot, but I'm not going to go so far as to say it's a definite main deck. Now, what's interesting is while I think that Ghost Bell is very good, I do not think that Skullmeister is worth it. Unfortunately, Ghost Bell just does pretty much what Skullmeister does, but better. Ghost Bell covers a lot of the important graveyard effects that Skullmeister would be hitting, and just does a lot more. Skullmeister's good, don't get me wrong, but I think that Ryzeal is already playing stuff like Abyss Dweller, and so Skullmeister feels redundant. I think that there are good graveyard effects, but not insanely broken graveyard effects floating around at the moment that justify use of Skullmeister that couldn't also be touched by some of these other hand traps. Again, we've got some of the best for last coming up here in the final stretch, but I do think that it is just unfortunately not worth it to be playing Skullmeister at the moment. Now, what is most certainly worth playing at the moment is Infinite Impermanence. This is, in my opinion, the best hand trap in the game at the moment, bar none. Infinite Impermanence gives you the option to negate your opponent's monster effects from the hand, quick effect speed, and it's not a monster. This is extremely impactful. There are only a few hand traps that are able to do that, including Impermanence. Impulse and Purge are all two other ones as well. In fact, they're not on the list right now. Let me go add them. Okay, so I've added those two, and we'll talk about them too. But back to Imperm. I think that Imperm is extremely strong. Like I said, it's a trap, so it doesn't trigger any of the talents cards, tactics cards, triple tactics talents, and triple tactics thrust. It is extremely important in stopping stuff like Duo Drive. It's stopping stuff like the White Rabbit or the Dormouse that can completely just shut down plays. Monster negation is very strong, and it coming in the form of a trap is very good. And of course, Imperm's great going first as well. You can set it. It can also negate spells and traps. It's just an overall insane card. A Veiler, kind of in the same spot, although I think it warrants all the way down to situational just because of the fact that it's a monster, and because of the fact that Imperm is just so good. Why play Veiler if you are already playing Imperm? Well, you'd only play Veiler if you have extra slots alongside Imperm. You'd never play Veiler over Imperm. I guess we'll see some play in Blue Eyes because of the fact that it's searchable in Blue Eyes, which is a plus. So it's definitely very good. In fact, that's why I'm putting it at the top of situational, because if you're playing Blue Eyes, it does feel very strong. but that doesn't mean you're not playing Imperm. You're still definitely playing Imperm in Blue Eyes because Imperm is so powerful. An auto include in the main deck for most main decks, if not every main deck. Just an overall insane card. Absolutely be playing 3 copies of this in the current form. The other card that I can say that for sure is Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ash Blossom is a monster, so it turns on the Talents cards, but who cares? Because of how good it is against everything. Also stops the Druid Drive search. Also stops all of the Mulch armies. It stops any of your searches with the Malice monsters. It can stop pretty much any rogue deck that searches. It stops your opponent's Engraver or their Tract more accurately, because you almost never want to Ash Engraver. You want to Ash the Tract. It's great into Blue Eyes. Ashing the Wishes can be turn ending for a lot of Blue Eyes opponents. It's in fact, I'm doing a lot of testing with Blue Eyes. I really don't see how you play through an Ash on Wishes in a lot of hands. Certainly, if your hand's good enough, that's actually not the case. You can play through it, but there are a lot of hands that just fold to an Ash in specific spots in Blue Eyes. So an absolute powerhouse, absolute main deck, not only as an offensive tool to stop your opponent when you're going second, but as a defensive tool to prevent your opponent from charming you going first. Definite auto include in every main deck. Nibiru is a card that I'm going to put into the definite side deck slot. I think that Nibiru is insanely good at the moment. Into Malice, it's not crazy. Actually, I shouldn't say insanely good. It's pretty good into Malice. It can shut down the Malice endboards. They are able to play through it in some respect if they have enough tools to extend, but a lot of times if you hold it for the right spots, it can be turn ending for them against decks that are super combo heavy, like Crystron or like not Fire King. Fire King doesn't tend to summon more than 5 times per turn. But against like any sort of rogue options, Nibiru can be absolutely game ending. The problem is against the best deck, Ryziel, it really struggles. It has a tough time. In fact, I'm going to move it down a little bit because I'm thinking more about it. It's not good into Ryziel because Ryziel almost always puts up the cross before you're able to Nibiru them. And the Blue Eyes, which I expect to be also very strong, can put up a board that does play into Nibiru, quote unquote, but they don't fully use all their resources. And so if you Nibiru them, they can extend through it. And then similarly, Malice has a number of ways to do that as well. Well, they'll end with a not fully committed combo, and then they force you to Nibiru there, and then they can continue to extend beyond that. So Nibiru, I do still think it's a side deck card that you should be playing in the current format, but it does feel a lot weaker into these matchups than I was expecting. So it's certainly a card that's lost a bit of stock, but not enough where I'd bump it down to situational. It's still very strong. And then the dominance cards. These are weird because they're by nature situational. Obviously, if your deck can't play them by nature of the attribute restriction, then don't play them. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about them in the context of assuming your deck is able to play through the attribute restriction. And in that case, I think that Impulse is a definite main deck, and Purge is probably a high situational. Impulse is absolutely nuts. No other card in the game does what it does, being able to stop effects that summon at hand trap speed. Only downside being you're locked out of the attributes that it locks you out of. But I do think that it is still insanely strong. If your deck can play it, you should be playing Impulse. One of the most impactful hand traps that, like a well-timed Imperm or Ash or Fua or Perulia, can completely just end a turn on its own, or Lancia. And then Purge is way more situational. For one, its attributes don't line up all that great into the top decks at the moment, which is tough for it. But additionally, it stops searches, which Ash already does, and you don't need to put that restriction on yourself. Now, the benefit of using this is that it most certainly gets you around the triple talents or tactics cards, which is a big deal. It being a trap is non-negligible. It's almost in the definite side deck area if you are able to play it. I wouldn't quite say it as a definite side deck, but it's very good. A super solid card that I would highly consider when deck building, but not necessarily an auto include. And then, yeah, it's just not quite as good as its other counterpart in Dominus Impulse. But that's all the hand traps. Thanks everyone for watching. I hope you enjoyed this informational video about all the hand traps that you could expect to be wanting to play in the upcoming format. If there are hand traps I missed that you wanted me to talk about or mention, let me know in the comments below. I can give you my thoughts and talk about them there. If you want to see more content like this, step 1, go ahead and subscribe to the channel. Step 2, go ahead and like the video so I can know that this kind of content is doing well and you want to see more of it. And then step 3 is let me know what other things you'd like me to do tier lists on or review down in the comments. I can certainly make periodic hand trip review videos, but presumably you don't want to see one of those every day. So go ahead and let me know in the comments what you'd like me to talk about or review next. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!